Grammy goes to When I Call.
I thank you very much. I'm always humbled every time something good happens, and
He's the understated maestro, building a reputation on soulful ballads, masterful guitar playing, and a humility rare in today's music scene. With 21 Grammys and decades of respect in Nashville, Vince Gill earned the title of country music's gentleman. But behind the calm smile and sharp suits, something deeper always lingered. Beneath that polished grace was a man fiercely devoted to his genre's roots, quietly simmering at those he felt were betraying them. At 68, he breaks the silence, not for spectacle, but for truth. To understand, we must return to the beginning. Before the awards, before the fame, before the grudges, when the foundation of his legacy was first laid. Born in Norman, Oklahoma in 1957, Vince wasn't raised in Nashville's glow, but he was raised in music. His father, a federal judge and part-time musician, handed him a guitar and taught him discipline paired with expression. His early years were anything but glamorous: long nights in dive bars, bluegrass circuits, sleeping in vans, playing for scraps, and gathering lessons only the road could teach. His first real breakthrough came in the late 1970s with the country rock band Pure Prairie League. By the mid-1980s, his solo career was taking flight. When the 90s arrived, Vince Gill was known for precision and artistry. His voice carried smooth warmth with real depth. His lyrics felt both intimate and universal. He wasn't just another country singer. He was a songwriter's songwriter. As country music turned louder, flashier, chasing crossover fame with pyrotechnics and spectacle, Vince remained rooted, a steady keeper of tradition. But that tradition faced growing threats. And though Vince rarely spoke it aloud, he was quietly keeping score. He honored the greats: Merle Haggard, George Jones, Buck Owens. But one name was always absent: Kris Kristofferson. To fans, it seemed strange. Kristofferson embodied outlaw spirit, poetic grit, and raw honesty. Yet Vince never placed him among the voices he praised. Over time, industry insiders began to piece together why. Kris Kristofferson and Vince Gill stood on opposite ends of the country music spectrum. Kristofferson, born in 1936, lived a dozen lives before fame: Rhodes Scholar, Army helicopter pilot, even a janitor at Columbia Studios in Nashville. By the late 60s, he broke through with songs like Sunday Morning Coming Down and Me and Bobby McGee. His style was unpolished, his voice rough around the edges. He once laughed, "I can't sing, but I can make people believe." That raw honesty was exactly what drew fans in. The flaws were part of his truth. Vince Gill, born in 1957 in Oklahoma, followed a very different road. There was no outlaw edge, only discipline and craft. In the early 1980s, he joined Pure Prairie League, quickly earning notice for his crystal-clear tenor and skill on the guitar. By the time he launched his solo career, Vince had established himself as one of country's most refined talents. His first Grammy came in 1991, and 20 more followed, rewards for staying grounded in tradition, precision, and musicianship. The divide between Kristofferson and Gill was never rooted in personal dislike, it was about philosophy. Kristofferson put storytelling first. For him, the raw emotion mattered more than perfect delivery. His voice could wander off key, his performances could feel uneven, but he believed honesty outweighed polish. Vince Gill saw it differently. To him, music demanded structure and discipline. Every chord and every lyric needed purpose. What Kristofferson called soulful, Vince considered careless. That difference surfaced most clearly in the 1990s, when both men began sharing festival stages and industry events. At a CMA rehearsal in 1994, Kristofferson was set to perform Help Me Make It Through the Night with just his guitar. One crew member later claimed Vince slipped out early, muttering, "I've watched this collapse before." The remark was never proven, but the rumor spread fast across Music Row. Publicly, Vince kept his distance. When asked about Kristofferson, he sidestepped, preferring to praise Willie Nelson or Waylon Jennings, Kristofferson's closest allies in the outlaw movement. Yet the silence around tributes to Kristofferson spoke louder than words. In 2009, when Chris was honored with the BMI Icon Award, Vince was asked to take part. He declined. The same happened in 2016 at the All for the Hall benefit show in Bridgestone Arena, an event Vince himself had helped create. Once again, he was absent. A veteran session guitarist later shared a memory from a Nashville gala. The two were chatting about a Kristofferson set that critics had praised as raw and powerful. Vince, however, was unconvinced. He reportedly sighed, "We've started calling broken things beautiful because we're too afraid to call them broken." It was never jealousy. Vince openly respected Kristofferson's gift as a writer, but he struggled to accept what he saw as a disregard for craft. To him, Kristofferson had lowered the bar, turning rough edges and whiskey-soaked delivery into a substitute for discipline and precision. That divide mirrored a larger rift within country music through the 1990s and early 2000s, a clash between raw emotion and refined craft, chaos and control. Kristofferson stood for the rebel spirit, while Vince defended tradition. One gave voice to the broken and weary, the other to precision and polish. Perhaps the clearest example came at the Country Music Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. In 2014, Vince delivered a moving tribute to M. Wisman, celebrated for pure vocals and clean arrangements. But in 2004, when Kristofferson was inducted, Vince was nowhere to be seen. Not on stage, not in the audience, not even in the conversations that followed. To many, that absence felt deliberate. In 2020, during a Rolling Stone Country Roundtable on songwriting, Vince was asked about the artists who shaped his lyrical style. He praised Merle Haggard, Don Schlitz, and Rodney Crowell, yet once again, Kristofferson's name was missing. A small omission, repeated often enough, had become a statement in itself. In the world of 1990s country music, Vince Gill and Garth Brooks stood as giants, yet they were never allies. Both dominated arenas, collected armfuls of awards, and expanded the genre's audience like few before them. But instead of camaraderie or even open rivalry, what existed between them was a calculated distance, cool and deliberate. To fans, it seemed puzzling. They were both crowned kings of country. Shouldn't that have made them natural brothers in arms? But Nashville insiders knew the truth. Their silence wasn't accidental. It came from a deep philosophical divide that neither man cared to close. By the time Garth Brooks made his Nashville debut in the mid-1980s, Vince Gill had already weathered years on the road. He'd logged time with Pure Prairie League, worked as a session musician, and carved his way into a solo career that flourished by the late 80s. His breakthrough album When I Call Your Name proved him a master, a soaring tenor with flawless guitar skills and songs rich with emotional honesty. To Vince, country music was a sacred art, not a marketplace. Garth Brooks burst onto the country scene with his 1989 debut, but it was No Fences that truly shifted the genre's direction. Blending traditional country with the fire of arena rock, he electrified audiences, sprinting across stages, smashing guitars, leaping from risers, and delivering vocals with the intensity of a rock frontman. His adoption of the headset microphone, unheard of in country music at the time, gave him the freedom to move like Bruce Springsteen rather than stand stoically like George Strait. Fans embraced it wholeheartedly. With more than 170 million albums sold, Garth became a phenomenon. But for Vince Gill, the flash came at a price. By the mid-1990s, Vince began voicing unease in interviews, suggesting that country music was drifting toward spectacle at the expense of storytelling. In a 1995 Country Weekly profile, he warned, "When we start losing the stories, we start losing ourselves." Though he didn't call out Garth by name, the implication was obvious. Brooks had just wrapped a record-breaking world tour that grossed over $100 million, fueled by pyrotechnics, lasers, and choreographed lighting. To Vince, it looked less like country and more like Broadway in a cowboy hat. As both men rose higher in country music, the unease only grew. At the 1998 CMA Awards, Vince and Garth Brooks were both up for Entertainer of the Year. By then, Garth had already claimed the title 4 times. Vince, despite years of critical acclaim and deep respect from fellow musicians, had never won it. When Garth's name was called again that night, Vince stood, clapped, and smiled, but those watching closely noticed the lack of warmth behind it. One sound crew member later remarked, "Vince clapped with his hands, but not with his eyes." Behind closed doors, the tension became harder to ignore. In 2005, Vince was invited to present Garth with the ACM Pioneer Award, but he turned it down. A producer from the show recalled Vince's response, polite but unwavering. "I can't stand there and say words I don't believe," he reportedly said. The comment spread quickly through Nashville's inner circles. It was more than just a refusal, it was a statement. For Vince, the rift was never about personal rivalry. It was about principle. Garth, in his eyes, marked the start of a new era of country, one that strayed too far from the values Vince fought to preserve. It was a version of country where showmanship overshadowed reflection, where style carried more weight than lyrics, and where commercial success mattered more than authenticity. Vince never went on record to attack it, that wasn't his nature. But his silence and his decisions told their own story. He never shared a stage with Garth, never collaborated, never took part in tributes or retrospectives that included him. When Garth Brooks was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2012, Vince was nowhere to be found, despite often serving as host or performer for other honorees. One of the rare moments they nearly crossed paths was in 2010 at a Nashville benefit concert for victims of the devastating Tennessee floods. Vince was on the program, Garth in the audience. Yet, at the last minute, Vince withdrew. The official word was a scheduling issue, but a backstage staffer suggested otherwise. "Let's just say some people perform better when certain people aren't in the room." In 2021, during a SiriusXM town hall, Vince was asked if he regretted never working with Garth. He sat in silence for several seconds before replying quietly, "You have to know who you are. And I've always known I don't belong on that kind of stage." His tone carried no resentment, only certainty. It was less a dismissal and more a final acknowledgement of the divide. That same sense of disapproval extended beyond Garth. When Achy, Breaky Heart exploded in 1992, turning Billy Ray Cyrus into an overnight sensation, Vince saw it not as progress but as a pop gimmick dressed up in country clothing. Line dancing swept America, and Billy Ray's mullet became as iconic as the hit that launched him. But while the crowds embraced it, Vince Gill simmered with frustration. Backstage at the 1993 CMAs, he was overheard saying the song had set country music back a decade. To Vince, that wasn't a punchline, it was his genuine belief. Achy, Breaky Heart embodied everything he resisted. Shallow, repetitive, built for flash instead of feeling. He once dismissed it as karaoke with a mullet. The two men never worked together, never shared a stage. And when chance placed them in the same hallway, witnesses said the tension was unmistakable. Vince's issue wasn't Billy Ray as a person, it was the wave he represented. A wave where image outweighed storytelling. To Vince, Billy Ray's rise on the strength of spectacle felt like a betrayal of country's foundation. And when Miley Cyrus later stormed into the pop country space, Vince didn't comment. For him, Achy, Breaky Heart wasn't just a novelty hit, it was an omen of what was to come. Overlooks Shania Twain's revolution. Shania didn't just succeed in country music, she transformed it. With Come On Over and other crossover hits, she merged country with pop hooks, high fashion, and international appeal. Fans and critics hailed her as a trailblazer, but Vince Gill saw it differently, not a triumph, but a stripping away of the genre's identity. He never spoke against her directly, but his feelings were clear. In interviews, Vince often lamented that the pursuit of radio hits had cost country music a generation of true fans, even questioning whether some performers still remembered which genre they belonged to. He never said Shania's name, but the implication was obvious. During award seasons, their names were listed side by side, yet they never shared a stage. Vince never praised her publicly, never joined her on a song, never offered a tribute. And in Nashville, silence can be louder than criticism. Among insiders, many believed Vince viewed Shania's success as the breaking point, the moment country shifted from self-reflection to chasing whatever would sell. Then came Jason Aldean and the rise of bro country in the 2000s and 2010s. Heavy drums, loud guitars, party-fueled lyrics, and endless pickup trucks dominated the airwaves. Aldean, with his caps and backroad anthems, became the face of the trend. To Vince Gill, it was a parody of the genre he loved. And this time, he didn't hold back. Speaking to Rolling Stone in 2014, he said, "We've dumbed it down. There's room for fun and music, but let's not pretend it's country just because there's a pickup truck in the video." The remark was widely seen as a direct jab at Aldean, whose catalog leaned more on beer and tailgates than on heartbreak or storytelling. Away from the spotlight, Vince quietly turned down invitations to festivals and award shows where Aldean was the featured act. For him, the issue went far deeper than taste or style, it was about survival. Bro country, in Vince's eyes, stripped away the very pillars of the genre he had dedicated his life to: storytelling, sincerity, and musicianship. What replaced them were buzzwords, party chants, and hooks that felt more like advertising slogans than songs. Then there was Kanye West, a figure far outside country music, yet still relevant to Vince's worldview. Kanye, to Vince, wasn't just an artist, he was the embodiment of an attitude Vince rejected: ego as art form, spectacle over substance, self-worship disguised as genius. Vince never called him out directly, but his words painted the picture. In 2016, shortly after Kanye proclaimed himself the greatest artist alive, Vince remarked in an interview, "I see young artists walk into a room expecting respect before they've earned it. In my time, you listened first. No names needed." The point was clear. For Vince, music was never about demanding reverence. It was about service, humility, and giving something real to the audience. Kanye, brilliant though he may have been, represented a culture built on virality rather than vulnerability, headlines instead of harmony. They never crossed paths, but the philosophical distance between them was immense. To Vince, the divide wasn't about country versus hip-hop. It was about soul. At the end of the day, it all comes down to principle. Was Vince Gill right to stand guard over tradition with such conviction? Or should music be allowed to bend, break, and reshape itself in the name of evolution? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this look behind the curtain of country music, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the heart of the genre.